we do systems because we want to make a difference in the world. To bring
Yeah.
those people together with practitioners who are coping with complexity and
Yeah.
struggling with complexity. Genuinely, this is going to be a vibrant event in which people can explore all types of system thinking. They can certainly reflect upon the way they are thinking about the world relates to the way other people are thinking about it, and develop awareness of what other things they might not be thinking about,
Yeah.
rather than developing the next, large language model, or at least how that would fit into a broader perspective on what they're trying to do in the world. It's all about why models are okay in the small world, but once you take models out into the larger world, they're of limited usefulness, and we need to develop narratives and get people going. Very annoying that in the state, people still identify system thinking with system dynamics.
If our small minds, for some convenience, divide this universe into parts, physics, biology, geology, astronomy, psychology, and so on, remember that nature does not know it. So let us put it all back together, not forgetting ultimately what it is for.
Complexity, by definition, is almost something that we can't understand.
Mhm.
So anybody that says there are this number of aspects of complexity
Mm.
doesn't know what they're talking about. They're excited about all the developments and the interest and the level of use of systems ideas these days, but wish I was 20 or 30 years younger.
Was it? I now want to pivot and talk about the systems thinking, systems practice conference, which is, I think, named after Peter Checklin's book. A lot of the listeners of the podcast who are tech people, Silicon Valley types. So why should an executive in Silicon Valley, of course, you just gave that answer in talking about the importance of systems thinking and being able to see the human side of things. But why should they attend this conference in specific?
Yeah, okay, let me bring it down to earth and why we should attend this conference. It is, I think, a renewal of systems thinking in the UK in this deliberate attempt to bring together theory and practice. So from the theory point of view, it allows practitioners and maybe people from Silicon Valley to really reflect on what they're doing in the way that I've just described at a very general level, but in a more specific level to work out what they're doing in terms of the different systems approaches to trying to improve things in the world, whether they are harder systems approaches, whether it's system dynamics, whether it's soft systems thinking or cybernetics or complexity theory. We have people from all those traditions coming. So, it's an open forum for really good debate. And this deliberate attempt to bring people from the academic theoretical side, I say none of us on that side are academics in the sense that we don't care about what happens in the world. We do systems because we want to make a difference in the world. To bring those people together with practitioners who are coping with complexity and struggling with complexity is the aim of the conference. And what I think we are actually succeeding in achieving, given my knowledge of what's happening in terms of those who are signing up for the event and those who are agreeing to be on panels, those who are agreeing to speak, those who are putting in presentations, those who are putting in posters, those who are involved in the various workshops involved. We're expecting 250 people. We're capping it close to that. Genuinely, this is going to be a vibrant event in which people can explore all types of system thinking. They can certainly reflect upon the way they are thinking about the world relates to the way other people are thinking about it, and develop their own awareness of what other things they might not be thinking about, rather than developing the next, large language model, or at least how that would fit into a broader perspective on what they're trying to do in the world.
Yes. Can you say more about the event specifically, like what keynotes or speakers that you're looking forward to hearing from?
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing from myself because haven't finished my paper yet, so I'm still learning.
Okay.
And my papers are direct reference to Checkland, because you're right, the conference name relates back to the very important book, Systems Thinking, Systems Practice, 1981 book. But in 1991, Checkland wrote this paper, which was saying what he felt was wrong with the systems movement. And so I'm trying to look into this, respecting what Checkland said then. And I think what he said then was still valid. And to look at ways in which we can progress from there. Because I said some of the things he said about how we should progress 35 years ago, not right, and we can do a better job. From the academic side, I'm looking forward that we've got Bartley Madden, who I mentioned, the business persons interested in systems. We've got John Seddon's work, David Snowden's talking from complexity theory, Angelo Espinosa around the viable system model, Ellen Lewis about forms of evaluation, particularly taking into account women's issues. Those are academics. There's a whole host of practitioners who are coming and giving their experience of working with systems ideas, particularly from the UK civil service. Because there's a systems thinking interest group in the civil service in the UK, which has now grown to over 1,000 members, and spread across all different departments of government. And that, it's one of the reasons I'm so confident about the interest in systems thinking and how that's growing, that it has grown in the UK civil service in that way. People concerned with health, there are significant streams on health, on evaluation. So there's the opportunity to learn about different systems approaches, but also about their application in various domains of practice. And as I say, workshops and panels and whatnot. It's broad. I really like the mix of things we've got at this conference. Really like it.
That's great to hear. Just the very idea of bringing the academic side and the practitioners together itself is just exciting. Which brings me to my next question. I've attended innumerable cybersecurity conferences as a cybersecurity practitioner myself. And what I've found is usually there's a lot of value in the hallway conversations during when you're getting coffee. And so will there be opportunities for such serendipity at the conference?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of space for that kind of thing. And then we're trying to create informal events. There's one event called Having a Pint with Mike Jackson and Roberto.
Awesome.
Which we hope will be informal, but that leads on to a pub quiz, which we will organize so that you meet lots of different people. If you sat around the table with one set of people, and there's the dinner. I should mention that for reasons I don't deserve it, but I have a series of lectures named after me at Hull University called the Mike Jackson Lectures, funded by an alumni and his wife of Hull. And they've been going for about 9 years now. This is the 10th one, I think. We've had people like Peter Senge, Fritjof Capra, Carlo Ravelli doing these lectures. This year we've got John Kay, who's an economist, writes for the Financial Times, but he's written a book with the ex-director of the Bank of England called Radical Uncertainty. And it's all about why models are okay in the small world, but once you take models out into the larger world, they're of limited usefulness, and we need to develop narratives and get people going on with that. So his work relates very closely to systems thinking, and John's come giving the Mike Jackson lecture this year, but there's a dinner associated with that. And that's another great opportunity for networking, social networking. But yeah, don't worry, we'll do everything possible to create that kind of environment. And it's hard to see how it can't succeed, given, as I say, the kind of people we've got coming along.
Awesome. I personally am excited and looking forward to attending and learning.
Meeting in person there would be great.
Awesome. So obviously the conference is one thing, but in terms of continuing education, is the Center for System Studies looking into building an online training or curriculum of sorts for Silicon Valley types? And I'll tell you that the reason why, because at least here in the US, MIT is kind of the dominant player when it comes to systems thinking training and workshops. And all they teach is systems dynamics. And I've seen the Silicon Valley types attend it, and then they think systems dynamics is the be all and end all. And then they sit down drawing causal loop diagrams of what they think is going on in their organizations. Just curious for your thoughts on that.
Very annoying that in the States, people still identify system thinking with system dynamics. It's changing, but very slowly in the States. It's not the case here. I think people have accepted the variety of traditions. And I think this pluralistic notion by critical system thinking has won the argument here. People can see value in the variety of systems approaches. If I was to be big-headed, I'd say that the Center for System Studies over its history has been sort of the best European center of systems thinking, comparable to MIT in the States. And of course, the difference has been that MIT has best system dynamics. That fantastic work being done by John Sterman, by the way. And Peter Senger's book really popularized system thinking for its era, a lapse after that, but it's highly useful that he popularized system thinking. Not knocking that work at all. I think work on the environment is brilliant. But at whole, we have been exploring the variety of systems approaches and what they can achieve. The Center for System Studies has been less than successful over the last few years than it was previously. I think the numbers of staff have declined for a variety of reasons, but we're fighting back, and we are looking at building undergraduate courses again, postgraduate and MSc in systems thinking or systems leadership, which would be offered worldwide and online, looking at Doctor of Business Administration in systems thinking. So I'm hoping that, in 6 months' time, I'll be able to tell you about the launch of undergraduate, postgraduate, MSc, and doctoral programs in systems thinking from Hull. So we'll get back to what we were doing maybe 15, 20 years ago. And it will be, again, a counterweight to what MIT does in terms of that on system dynamics by promoting the variety of different systems approaches.
Awesome. That's great to hear. Would love to have you back to talk more about that when it's launched.
Yeah. I look forward to talking about that when it's launched. It's a lot of hard work for not for me necessarily, because I'm semi-detached. I'm just trying to encourage it. But for a lot of the people there, it's very much hard work. But that work is ongoing now, and I'm pleased to say we have the support of the business faculty and of the university in redeveloping the Center for System Studies at home.
That's great to hear. I'd like to shift gears now to talk about your latest book, Critical Systems Thinking, A Practitioner's Guide, which is very, very thematic about just practice in general. And so in the preface, you mentioned that despite, 45 years in the field and having written comprehensive theoretical works, you felt a sense of unfinished business. You expressed frustration that while interest in systems thinking is resurging, it often lacks historical knowledge, or they end up reinventing the wheel, which you also discussed here in the podcast. So what specific gap is the practitioner's guide trying to fill that your previous books did not? And why is this intervention necessary now?
Yeah, you're right. I was frustrated because I'd written this series of books, um, finishing off by the doorstopper, the 700-page book, which, I'm happy to discuss any aspects of that book. I think it's well researched. I try to get in the mind of the people who are developing the different systems traditions to think as they thought for the period when I was writing about the chapters on their work.
Mhm.
But clearly, a book of that length and of that depth, and of what I hope is that intellectual rigor, doesn't easily translate to practice. It's not readable by the practitioner. I'm not sure I'm ever going to be able to write a book. You've got down certain avenues in life, which is immediately accessible to a practitioner, but the practitioner's guide is my attempt to do that. So it's an attempt to translate the really important ideas, which I think I've sieved out of systems thinking over my time researching it. I think I know what works, what's good, and what's not so good in systems thinking. To try and sieve out the rubbish and keep the really good stuff, and to realize what that really good stuff does and can do for us. So it is what it says. It's attempt to be a practitioner's guide. To explain what systems thinking as a whole is about, to explain why it's necessary, complement to the scientific method, the old scientific method. The new version of science is becoming much more systems-based, but the old version of the scientific method. To maintain the powerful ideas in systems thinking without diluting them or distorting them, but still to open people's minds to why they were useful, and how they could help them, how they could help them, both in terms of being able to think more broadly, different mindsets, and the methodologies that support those mindsets. In other words, if you want to think about the world from a biological organismic perspective, then you'll find, and in it that way, you'll find nothing better than Cyb3rSyn's viable system model as a way of doing that. So that was my attempt to do that in the book. Person called Kathy Hobbs said to me, "You need a mnemonic, to describe what you're doing." And I think with her or with me, I probably came up with the notion of epi. And I made it fit with this sort of explore, produce, intervene, check.
Yes.
I was unhappy doing that, to be honest, but it seems to work wonders. In other words, again, the level of interest and the use of epic now has expanded far beyond anything that I could have envisaged, given that book came on the shelves about a year or so ago.
Yeah.
So I can see it being used in all kinds of different fields now. So it was worth trying to translate the ideas properly into a form that could be easily understood, and overcoming my doubts about coming up with something like epic to describe, to have done that to see that it's having traction, while all the time insisting that the word epic is tongue-in-cheek. Never meant to be something that you can apply directly in the real world. Anything of this nature has to be altered when you apply it in the real world, reflecting the circumstances in which you're operating. But it's an ideal type. This is the best that systems thinking has to offer. If you want to understand the world through systems thinking, if you want to intervene in the world using systems practice, then this is the best that there is available. I think. And you can go in with that mindset, and you can modify what you do according to the realities that you face in the world pragmatically. But you can always reflect back on the ideal type and say, well, actually, in this situation, I was able to achieve this. But what I wasn't able to achieve was this. I wasn't able to improve the position of women in this organization because of power relationships. You'll always be made aware of that by critical systems practice and epi. you might not always be able to do something about it. And the same with all the other things. You may be able to make the organization more efficient,
Mhm.
more goal orientated. You may damage its capacity to be viable over time,
Yeah.
because you're taking out some redundancy that's available in the organization. But ethical keeps you coming back to these other themes, and thinking about what you're missing in doing things a certain way in the world. So it's an ideal type guide to practice, which we're continually working on. I'm just delighted to see the take-up there has been of the approach.
Awesome. While answering this question, you mentioned the scientific method. And even in the book, you trace the dominance of the scientific method all
Yeah.
the way back to Descartes and Newton and all the incredible success we've had in the physical world. But you argue that it fails when dealing with organized complexity and human freedom. Can you double click on that? Can you explain why you believe that the scientific method is blind without systems thinking?
Yeah. It probably goes back to things that I've already been saying. The Enlightenment
Mhm.
had two aspects to it, really. There was the scientific aspect to it, the control over physical reality,
Mhm.
natural world, some of which was incredibly beneficial to us, in medicine, in health, in agricultural productivity, in scientific development. We've increased lifespans, all the rest of it. And there was a radical enlightenment that was running alongside it for quite a time, but became suppressed because the scientific environment came to dominate.
Mhm.
And so the things that the Romantic poets and Goethe was saying in Schelling in France, Wordsworth, Coleridge, etc. in the UK, Whitman and people like that in the States, all that human side what was suppressed, and that was the side, as I was alluding to earlier, the the human beings being part of nature. We're natural being, if you like to take it in a philosophical manner. We're, in a sense, with nature becoming able to think about itself. I think
Mhm.
that idea was there in Schelling. It's remarkable, really. We're natural beings. We're part of this natural environment. We've developed as part of nature, Spinoza. But somehow we can think about nature thinking about itself. We're part of nature, but we can reflect upon nature and our part in it. And our development, again, I won't go back to things I've said already, our development of human beings, personally, human beings with a capacity to relate to the world in alternative ways,
Mhm.
poetical ways. And so, and those kinds of things which were there, and politically, of course, you read some of the thinkers in the radical Enlightenment, and they were against colonialism and imperialism long before it
Mhm.
became mainstream to be against those things. There was that political element for it, liberation for all. If my mind can develop freely, then everybody should have the capacity to develop freely. That's even there in as early as Spinoza was in many ways one of the main elements that fed into the radical side of the Enlightenment. But that was suppressed. And I like to think that systems thinking can go back to the Enlightenment and learn from those sides of the radical Enlightenment that were suppressed by the success, really, of the scientific aspect of
Mhm.
Enlightenment, and bring to the fore again those different ways of thinking about the world and acting in the world. That would be my ambition, and that's why the book practitioner's guide starts with that challenge to the dominance of the scientific version of the Enlightenment and wants to bring forward the work of the Romantics and explain why the work was unimportant. They were objecting to the dark satanic mills in the UK, already industrialization taking over and destroying the environment. So they were already objecting to that and seeing that way of thinking could lead us to peril, the kind of that we're in now with the environment and relating to one another. So system thinking has the capacity to focus on and bring forward these suppressed elements of the Enlightenment through more organismic ways of thinking, more purposeful ways of thinking, more societal ways of thinking, more interrelationships ways of thinking. Those things which we've forgotten about can be brought to the fore again. I'm just great that systems thinking is capable of doing that. Made sure that it realizes potential by being pluralistic and saying, well, yeah, we need this mechanistic way of thinking, but we need a more balanced world. That was a phrase that was used by Hans Oscar Began, if I got his name right. I used at the beginning of the book. We can't do without the achievements of the scientific revolution, but we need a more balanced world. Those achievements are just part of what we're aiming for and are seen in proportion to what they can offer.
Yeah. This kind of reminds me of the quote from Richard Feynman, my childhood hero. And he talks about how a poet once said the whole universe is in a glass of wine. And he goes on to talk about if our small minds, for some convenience, divide this universe into parts, physics, biology, geology, astronomy, psychology, and so on, remember that nature does not know it. So let us put it all back together, not forgetting ultimately what it is for.
That's great. I mean, it's come to the same conclusion as Whitman and Akoff, who said the world's not made up of disciplines. Universities divide the world into disciplines, but the world itself's not made up of disciplines.
I think somehow that meta transdisciplinary nature of systems thinking is somehow completely lost in consciousness.
Absolutely. Why? As I said, it's 99% of the education in universities is discipline-based and reductionist. We should have 50% at least, which is transdisciplinary and which is holistic. That would be a big step towards getting the sort of balanced world that I've been talking about. And we know some of the reasons. We know that people get career advancement through specializing in a particular discipline. We know that academics hate going out in the real world and testing their ideas out in practice. They'd rather sit in their studies. And all these reinforcing trends. But it's time somebody did something about it. Government did something about it. To put resource in different places.
You're excited about EPIC and where it's going. Can you talk a little bit more specifics about where EPIC is headed? Any research areas, people that are taking it forward? What are you excited about?
There's a lot of work going on. Particularly on the explore stage, which people are finding really interesting as a sense making. Through looking at the issues that they face through the 5 systemic perspectives, which EPIC has as its way of doing explore, and those perspectives are not random. They come from the study of world hypotheses that have proved useful to the human species, metaphors, Morgan's work that are useful to the organizations. So in a pragmatist sense, you can see that these are proven useful. The people are finding them useful in exploring problematic situations in which they find themselves. So some of the work is about looking at how they can be made easier to use by practitioners. And a lot of people have come to the notion that what we need, let's say you're exploring the world through the organismic perspective, we need a set of questions which would pin down the kinds of things you're asking from that particular worldview, and distinguishing it from the mechanistic, from the purposeful, etc. So as people, I've been working with various people. I've almost lost count of the number of people who've been trying to develop questions which would help EPIC. Some recent work, I won't name those people, they know who they are, but some recent work that has been taken forward by the complex systems group in COSI is in sense a summary of all this other stuff. Produced quite a nice range of questions which will illuminate each of the systemic perspectives. Now, I'm of the view that according to the domain of work, whether it's project management or logistics or engineering, in the case of COSI, those questions need slightly modifying, but nevertheless quite close to getting some questions which illuminate, in my mind, very helpfully the different systemic perspectives. And so that helps individuals who are using this either themselves or as facilitators to take that thinking forward. There's work on the check phase and evaluation from a critical systems perspective, on the pragmatic aspects of it, using it in risk management. I've just literally yesterday completed editing a special newsletter for the Risk Society on how system thinking and critical system thinking can contribute to risk management in the VUCA world. Because as you know, the traditional risk management approaches are mechanistically based and tend to end up with tick box procedural things.
Yes.
But if you look at risk more broadly from a critical systems perspective, risk can come not just from not achieving things efficiently, but from having an organization which is not responding to its environment, from having disagreements among stakeholders, from not managing appropriate interrelationships, from polluting the environment and that coming back in publicity to hit you. So risk, if you see risk from a critical systems perspective, then you've got a much better way of dealing with strategic risk. So people are working on that. And this is a really nice newsletter that we've just produced, about 8 papers, eight opinion pieces, and 8 case study pieces where systems thinking and critical systems thinking have been used to rethink what risk management should be about.
Yeah. I'm intrigued because, I come from a cybersecurity background and risk management applies there as well. And many of my peers try to explain security breaches and failures in terms of technical failures, lack of this security control, that security control. But I am more curious about the underlying human elements, the internal power struggles and perverse incentives and why that team is not talking that deep. And I try to think in terms of those forces.
Those major risk areas. For example, from a critical systems thinking perspective, you would analyze, because you'd come in from all these different perspectives and work out which were the primary dominant risks for the organization from all these different perspectives at any point in time. It's a real challenge to traditional risk management, which, as you say, operates with a mindset which leads it to do just the things that you mentioned there.
Yeah. Awesome. I watched a recent, it was not so recent actually, a conversation between you and Patrick Hopperstadt.
Oh, yeah.
And, I'm curious to hear more about your take, because in that particular session, you didn't go into a lot of depth for reasons of time, I guess. And if I can recollect that. And he was, obviously you're a proponent of the 5 lenses that you use for critical systems thinking, but Patrick seems to think they can be just 3 different perspectives of complexity. Can you say more?
Last year, I watched, funny enough, I'm a big Bob Dylan fan.
Uh-huh.
Bob Dylan,
Mhm.
the folk rock.
Yes, yes.
I was watching an old interview with Bob Dylan the other day,
Mm.
and there was, in those days, we used to call these people squares. You know, a journalist was a square. He didn't understand anything what Dylan was about.
Mm.
Dylan sang about such people. In this interview, he said to Dylan, in the world in which you were, folk music world, the protest singing world, how many protest singers are there that are mining the same music as you are? And Dylan looked at him and said, 132. He said, about 132. And the journalist said, about 132? Do you mean exactly 132? Or, and Dylan said, well, it might be 132 or it might be 144. I'm not sure. And I can't help thinking about that when I think about this discussion.
Mm.
You cannot, complexity by definition is almost something that we can't understand.
Mm.
So anybody that says there are this number of aspects of complexity
Mm.
doesn't know what they're talking about. They, you know, I could, if I wanted, give you 132, 145 aspects of complexity. So I'm not interested in that. An epistemological angle.
Yeah.
How is it useful to the human species to look at complexity?
Yeah.
And those are where the 5 perspectives in critical systems thinking come from. It's useful to look at complexity as something which we can occasionally manage to achieve goal. It's useful to look at it from an organismic perspective. We have to somehow respond to it and enable organizations and things we want to survive to do so over time. It's useful to look at it in terms of, well, we disagree about lots of things. That must be adding to complexity. So let's look at it in terms of being about disagreement between people. The human race throughout its history has been trying to improve itself in terms of societal arrangements. You know, going back to getting the vote for everybody, then vote for women and vote for different races. That's an important element of the human species. Let's look at complexity in terms of what we can achieve in relation to that. So I'm not interested. You can't say these and that aspects of complexity exist. Complexity is beyond definition. But we can say it's useful from our point of view as a human species to look at complexity in these ways and seek to address those aspects of complexity. And my 5 aspects, if you want me to defend that, come from a reading of the philosophical and the sociological and the organization theory literature. That these are proven useful worldviews for the human species in a pragmatic sense. This is how we've handled the complexity of the world usefully and got something for ourselves, advanced ourselves as a species. Evolutionary, as we evolved as a species, but also socio-culturally since we established society. I can see that these 5 ways of thinking about the world, about the complexity of the world, have proven useful. And it's so happened. It's not surprising, therefore, that to me, 5 families of systems methodologies which respond to those. You'd expect if people were thinking about how can I do things in the world that are going to be successful, that they would have developed the 5 families of systems approach that would respond to these 5 perspectives on complexity, if you like. So, you know, to put it technically, you can't say anything about complexity ontologically. That's the point of having a concept like complexity. You can talk about it epistemologically, that it's useful to address it in these different ways. I happen to have 5. I'm not saying somebody can't come up with 6 or 7 of them, but from my reading of the philosophy and the sociology, that's fine.
Yeah. I think that's a great response. Harish Joes often talks about complexity, not about the description of what the phenomenon, the ontology that's going on, but more about our description. It's a more epistemological.
Absolutely. Yeah. Otherwise, you end up with arguing about whether there are 142 or 146 different protest singers.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Before we close the podcast, I'm curious about, you're also involved in a lot of actual engagements, projects in the world. Any recent interesting case studies or projects that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you one practical one that I can't name the organization, but it's
Sure.
introducing systems thinking to relatively large organizations, about 150 people. They want to train all their people in systems thinking. They're in the game of moving towards zero waste and sustainability. And it's how you engage with different sectors in the economy to ensure that they know how they might go about doing that, and encouraging them to do that. In other words, show that their supply chains can still remain efficient, and while they adopt. There's more and more commands that you've got to measure, not just how you self-act in terms of zero waste, but how your supply chain does, how your suppliers do. Are you dealing with suppliers who are operating sustainably? And down the line, what happens to your products after you've sold them? Can they be disposed of, and so on. So that work is very, very interesting, and I think it's going particularly well. Another one is a more less applied, but more equally important, is I talked about the interest in the UK among civil servants about in system thinking. Now, the system thinking interest group being over 1,000 people, and they've helped us with this conference in Hull. There's a system thinking working group, which I co-chair with Patrick Hoverstadt, a joint group set up by the Government Office for Science and SCIO, System and Cybernetics Organization. And a while ago, there was produced for civil servants a guide, a system thinking journey, and a system thinking toolkit, which were, good introductions to primarily system dynamics. And a couple of us then got on to Sir Patrick Vallance, who was the Chief Scientific Officer at that time, and said, well, this underplays system thinking. There are this variety of systems approaches, and you might find that some of them are more applicable to the work of policy making and the work of civil servants than system dynamics is, though it's good in its place. And those guides, the systems thinking journey and the system thinking toolkit, are in the process of being rewritten to reflect a broad range of systems approaches. So that's another project I think is important, and which we're engaged in now.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Before we wrap up, Mike, any other questions that I should have asked but didn't, or any key takeaway messages for our audience?
You probably should have asked me, Lax, how long can I keep going? Because excited about all the developments and interest and the level of use of systems ideas these days, but wish I was 20 or 30 years younger. And as I think I say at the end of the book, being a systems academic or a systems practitioner or systems teacher or a writer of books about systems actually takes you away from being a systems person, because you have to sacrifice a lot to do things in terms of communing with nature, your family and friends, developing yourself as a more rounded person. So there'll come a time when I have to trade off. Well, I'm already trading off but the trade-off has to become less systems thinking and more becoming a systems person.
Yes.
So if I can achieve that, smoothly, then I'll be very happy, a very happy person.
Awesome. That's a great message and deeply resonates with me because, I started learning about systems thinking and complexity for work, and then realized how profound these ideas that you can apply, and it changes you as a person, as a human being, as a father. And so that really kind of pushed me to quit my corporate job. And now I'm an entrepreneur, and the ability to focus on my health and relationships and to enjoy what I do on a day-to-day basis gives me, balance of all of these things. And I think that's a great parting message.
We're fortunate that system thinking allows us to do those things. It
Yes.
links us to nature and the universe, and we can reflect upon those things as much as it can help us to improve technical process.
Yes. Awesome. Mike, thank you so much for being so generous with your time and sharing your journey and insights. Thank you for being on. Yes.
Excellent questions and leading this discussion. Thank you.